Hello, grade 10s. Welcome back to our next lesson. So, we're going to just start off by going over the corrections from the previous exercise that I gave, which was 9.1 on page 284. I gave you A, B, and C. Okay, so we start off by reading the question. So, what I would recommend that you do is that when you are reading the question, that you write out, because you know that it's going to be a financial question. So read the whole thing. You see, okay, um, they say calculate the using appropriate formula. Number one is simple interest. Number two is compound interest. So you know that for the first one, it's going to be simple interest. So start by writing out the formula that you need. So it will be A is equal to P1 plus I times N. Now, when you reread the question, start to pick up on the different values that you have. So it says that he invests amount of 20,000 in the bank. So clearly that must be his principal amount of 20,000. Then the interest rate is 4.5%. So you write 4,5 and then the percentage sign on your calculator. Okay, then the N is to calculate using for 6 years. Okay, so you'll put that whole thing in your calculator and you'll get the amount A to be equal to 25,400. Okay, so notice it says that you must calculate the accumulated amount of the 6 years and the total interest he will receive. So the total interest received is the second part of this question. Which you'll take the A value, which is 25,400, and you subtract it from the 20,000. And you'll get a total of 5,400. Okay, so those are the two answers that you had to give. Okay, then let's move on to the second one. So the second question was compound interest. So again, A is equal to P1 plus I to the power of N. Now you already know all the values, you just substitute them in the new places. So you'll have 20,000, 1 plus 4.5% to the power of 6. So you'll put that in your calculator and you should get 26,045 Rand and 20 cents. Okay, so if I want to know what the total interest is, I'm going to take the A value again, which was, I just calculated to be 26,045.20, minus the P value, which was 20,000, and you'll get a total of 6,045 Rand and 20 cents. Okay. Then the next question says, if Phil wants to purchase a stove costing 12,000 Rand, she wants to pay back this amount with interest in 2 years' time. The interest rate is 24%. Calculate the amount that she will repay. Okay, so don't let the wording here confuse you. Okay, you can clearly see that number one, you must identify the type of interest that you're working with in order to figure out which formula to use. So you can clearly see that it says 24% per annum simple interest. So you know that it's simple interest, meaning that your equation will be A is equal to P1 plus IN. Now, they said that she wants to pay back the 12,000 with the interest that has grown. So the amount that she must pay is after 2 years. Okay, so that's the key word here, is that they use the words after 2 years, which means that you are still calculating the A value, and the P value is the 12,000 that she borrows today. Okay, so if you get confused, just ask yourself, the A value is what I'm going to get after the few years, and the P value is what I am going to have today. That's the amount that she has today. So the amount that she loans today is 12,000. 1 plus the interest rate they said was 24%, and the N value she said she wanted to pay it back in 2 years. Okay, so you put that whole thing in your calculator and you'll get the A value to be equal to 17,760 Rand. Okay. Then number 2 says, if she wants to pay the loan off in monthly payments over the 2-year period, what will her monthly payments be? Okay, so let's think about that. So in order for her, so she owes a total of 17,760 Rand. Now if she has to pay that back in monthly installments, then obviously we're going to divide that by the number of payments. Okay, so you can basically use a formula to say that the payments would be equal to the total amount over the total payments, total number of payments. Okay, so this is, you don't have to necessarily learn this, but it's just a helpful way in order for us to analyze how we're going to work this out. So if the total amount is 17,600, now we need to ask ourselves, okay, how many payments does she actually make? Well, it says in the question that she wants to pay it off monthly, but we can't use 12 because it says there that she does it for 2 years. So it will be 2 times 12. Okay, because there's 12 months in a year and she pays it off for 2 years. Okay, so you'll put that on your calculator and you should get an answer of 740 Rand. So this is how much she's going to pay every month, and she'll have accumulated the 17,760 Rand. Okay. Then the next question, C, it says Nkemba invested, I think it's Nkemba invested 500,000 in the share market. He managed to secure an average compound interest rate of 14% per annum during the first 2 years. Calculate the value of his investment at the end of the 2-year period. Okay, so first of all, when you read the question, first step, identify the type of interest you're working with. So you can see it says compound interest rate. So we know it's compound interest, which means that I'm going to have A is equal to P1 plus I to the power of N. Okay, so it says they want to know the amount at the end of the 2-year period, so they want the A value. Okay, the P value was given at 500,000. 1 plus the interest rate is 14% to the power of 2 for 2 years. Okay, then you'll put that in your calculator and you'll get 649,800 Rand. Okay, that was the first question. The second question now asks, it says, during the next 3 years, he managed to secure an average compound interest rate of 12% per annum. What is his investment then worth at the end of the next 3 year period? So now what's happened is that again it's still compound interest. So we have A is equal to P1 plus I to the power of n. But now what's happened is that this is talking about the next 3 years. So it means that after 2 years, this is how much is sitting in the account. So if you understand how compound interest works in the previous lesson, we know that interest is calculated on the amount plus the interest rate. Okay, so we are not going to then use the original amount for the p-value here because that amount has changed. So when we calculate this, we'll say 649,800. 1 plus the interest is 12% per annum, and this amount of money sits in that account on 12% per annum for 3 years. Okay, so we break it up. We don't make the time period 5 years, and we don't use the original p-value. Remember, that is not how this works. Okay, the interest rate changes to 12% when there is this much money in the account. So this much money grows at this interest rate for an additional 3 years. That's what the question is saying. So you're going to put that in your calculator, and you're going to get the answer to be 912,922.21 cents. Okay, and that's it. So please go over the questions again if you need further elaboration. Otherwise, after this, you can rule off. You can write the date, which is going to be the 14th of May. And your heading is going to be, we're still looking at simple and compound interest, but we're going to look at calculating the other values. So we can just say calculating other values using simple and compound interest. Okay, it's a bit of a long heading, but essentially it would be part 2 of simple and compound interest. And now we're just going to look at calculating the p-value, the i-value, and the n-value. Okay, so let's start with the first example. So we'll have a look at example 1. Okay, so in this example, we're going to have 4 years ago, money was invested into a bank. Currently, the account has 200,000 Rand. Calculate the original money that was invested if the interest rate was, and then there's two parts. Okay, the first one is going to be 8% per annum simple interest, or 8% per annum compound interest. Okay, so let's continue. It says 4 years ago money was invested into the bank. So currently there's 200,000, so they want you to work out. So for the first one, it's going to be simple interest. A is equal to P1 plus IN. Now, if you read this question, hopefully you notice the key part, right? It's easy to identify the interest rate. It's there, it's 8% for both of them. And it's also easy to identify the period because it's going to be 4. But now the question is, what is the 200,000? Is it going to be the A value or is it the P value? So let's read the question. It says 4 years ago money was invested. Currently the account has 200,000. So if we're working with this amount, it's important that you realize that although the word currently is used to describe the 200,000, okay, it is not how we calculate this A value here, because it says 4 years ago money was invested. So the money that was invested into the bank 4 years ago is the P value, because this amount of money has no interest or no growth yet. So that's what we are specifically looking for. We're looking for the amount of money that has no growth, which was the money that they are asking you to calculate. Okay, so they said they want to know the original amount of money. So that screaming P value is what is unknown. So if P value is unknown, then the 200,000 must be the A value. So we substitute that in. So it will be 200,000, which is equal to P1 plus the interest was given at 8%, and the time period was 4 years. Okay, so the most important part here now is to make sure that you use the answer feature on your calculator. So on your calculator, next to the equal sign on the left, you'll see it says answer. That is the answer for your previous calculation. We already went through this when we were doing trig, because the whole point here is not to round off until the final step again, otherwise your answer is going to be incorrect. Okay, so what you can do is you can, if you want to, simplify this bracket first and then go from there, or you can just write it out. So if you have P multiplied by this, then the only way that you can solve for P, if it's P times this, then you're going to have to divide by this in order to get P on its own. So if you divide both sides by that, you'll have 200,000 divided by 1 plus 8% times 4. Okay, make sure that you compute this on your calculator, and make sure that you do it because these numbers are quite big. So you want to make sure that you are working on the calculator skill, because there's no point in doing it and then you realize, oh well, this actually isn't working, I'm not getting the answer that I'm supposed to. Okay, so this is quite an interesting answer. So the p-value that you would have gotten is 151515,15. Okay, so 151,515 and 15 cents is what the answer is here for the p-value. So notice that for these questions, as a general rule, so you can actually check, the a value must always be bigger than the p-value. Otherwise, you've done something wrong, because remember, money is growing. So if you look here, the a value, the p-value here is 151,000. This one is 200,000. So clearly we are on the right track, that this p-value is smaller than that a value. Okay, so just as a general rule, when you are calculating, always remember that. Okay, so let's try the second one. So the second one is going to be a is equal to p1 plus I to the power of n. Again, you're given the a value, so none of the values are going to change what they represent in the equation. So you will still have 8%, but now it's going to be to the power of 4. So what I recommend that you do here then is simplify this bracket first. So put this part in your calculator and put the answer here. But remember, do not round off. So do not. So you can, I'll show you how we're going to write it, but you may not round off on the calculator. Use the answer feature. So if you put this on your calculator, you'll say 1 plus 8%. Don't forget to put the brackets. All to the power of 4. Make sure you do this on your calculator. Then you'll get 1,36, and it continues. So you can write that like this. You can write it in this format. It's perfectly fine. But do not round off. Okay. So then you can say, well, therefore P is going to be equal to, you divide both sides by this amount. So you'll have 200,000 divided by answer. So that's what you'll put on your calculator. You'll say 200,000 divided by answer. You don't have to write this. I'm just using this to show you how I'm getting to this answer and what it should look like on your calculator. But you don't have to write this. So this is just what it looks like on your calculator. You can write it if you really want to, but it's really, really not necessary to write it. It's actually a bit confusing to write that. But it's just to show you, again, what's on the calculator. So if you do that, you should get an answer of 147,005,97. If you didn't get to this exact answer, it's probably because you rounded off. So do not round off until the last step. Okay, otherwise you are going to lose marks. Okay, so moving on, we have the next example, which is example 2. So with example 2, we're going to look at the following question. It says, how long will it take for 40,000 Rand to grow by 5,000 Rand if the rate of interest per annum is 4.5% simple interest. So, first of all, we are using simple interest. So A is equal to P1 plus IN. So take a moment, pause the video, and identify which values you have, the A, P, I, and N. So which ones do you have, and which ones do they want you to calculate? Okay, so you can see that the 40,000 is the amount that you have right now. Then 5,000 is how much it's going to grow by, which means that the A value is going to be 45,000, okay, because it grows by 5,000. Then the 4.5% is obviously going to be the interest. And they want to know how long. So how long is the N value that they want. Okay, so let's substitute. We have 45,000 for the A value, 40,000 for the P value, 1 plus the interest, which is 4.5%, times the N value. So now we are trying to solve for N. So what I recommend that you do is that you solve it slowly by doing the things that you know. So I first see, well, this is 40,000 times this. So you want N on its own. So first get rid of what's outside of the brackets, which is this 40,000. So we're going to divide both sides by 40,000. That is our first step. So we'll have 45,000 divided by 40,000, and we'll get 9 over 8. So 9 over 8 is equal to 1 plus 4.5% multiplied by N. Now again, we're going to use our basic algebra. So we're going to minus 1 on both sides. So we have 9 over 8 minus 1, which is going to be 1 over 8, which is equal to 4.5% multiplied by N. Then you're going to divide both sides by 4.5%. So you divide 4.5%, and you will get the N value to be equal to 2.78 years. Okay, so the question didn't specifically ask you the amount of years. It just said how long will it take. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to show you an additional step. So this is how much it's going to be in years. But it's not really exactly how long it's going to take in terms of years and months. So I'm going to show you how to do it in years and months. So let's consider the full example where 2.77777 ... So what we do know so far is that it's going to be 2 years. Okay, definitely is going to take 2 years. So I'm going to subtract 2 from this above. And by doing that, I'm going to have an answer which is 0.77777 dot 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 dot. Now, I'm going to multiply this by the amount of months that there are in a year, which is going to be 12. So you take that, you minus 2 to get 0.777. Make sure you use the answer feature again on your calculator. So you'll just say answer minus 2. And then again, you're going to say answer times 12. And you should get an answer of 9.333 dot dot dot, which means that it's going to take 2 years and 9 months. Okay, and you can leave it like that. We don't often do days because remember days are a bit tricky because remember there isn't a exact number of days per month. Some months have 30 days, some months have 31 days, and even February only has 28 days. So days are a bit trickier, but we can definitely do the years and the months, and this is the method that you would follow. Okay, so we've worked out now how to calculate the p-value. We've worked out how to calculate the n-value. Important, I'm not really going to write it down, but we will never ask you to calculate the n-value for compound interest, okay? Because that requires something that you will only learn much later on in maths. You'll only learn it in grade 12, which means that we don't really teach it in grade 10, and depending on how grade 11 goes, we could potentially teach it in grade 11, but you require a topic that is only done in grade 12 in order to solve for compound interest, period. So we don't really do it for compound interest. Okay, so let's look at the third example. Okay, so this one now is going to be to solve for I. So we'll start by saying 18,000 Rand grows to 25,000 Rand over a period of 2 years. Calculate to 1 decimal place the interest rate earned, the interest rate, not earned, just the interest rate, if the rate is, so let's look at simple, and then let's look at compound. Okay, so again, we're going to just start by figuring out what formula we need. So for A, I know I'm going to need the simple interest formula. Now, it says 18,000 grows to 25,000. So I know that this is the P value and this is the A value. Okay, that should be quite easy to identify. And we can see that the period is 2 years. So I'm going to put all that information in. I have 25,000 is equal to 18,000. 1 plus the interest, which I'm calculating, and the period, which is 2. So again, I'm going to follow a similar procedure to what I did when I was calculating the n value. So I'm going to start by dividing both sides by 18,000. Okay, this is the easiest way to go about doing it. So don't multiply anything, just divide by the number outside of the bracket. And you should get an answer which is 25 over 18. Okay, leave it as a fraction because it's more accurate and it's easier to write. And in case you lose your answer on the calculator, at least you don't have to repeat the step. Please, now, when you look at this, okay, obviously the brackets will disappear. Please do not be silly now, okay, and forget your rules of algebra and say, oh, well, 1 plus 2i is 3i. That's very bad. Okay. And for those of you that are already know that that's not what you're supposed to do, the reason is because these are not like terms. Okay, this is still a variable. So it's like saying 1 plus 2x is 3x. That's wrong. We'd never do that. Okay, we say x plus 2x is 3x. So please be careful of like terms. Okay, this is not like terms, so you do not add them at all. Instead, you're trying to solve for I. So you'll have 2i, which is equal to 25 over 18 minus 1. So you'll take your answer minus 1. So you'll get 2i is equal to 7 over 18. And then you'll divide both sides by 2. So you'll get I to be equal to 0.1944. But now, does that make sense? 0.19%? No, it doesn't. And it's because this answer is not in percent. This answer is the decimal for I. So you have to multiply by 100 in order to get the percentage. So this step is vital to remember. So you must do this to get percentage. So if you multiply that by 100 and it's set to one decimal place, you'll get an answer of 19.4%. Okay, that is the actual interest that you have. Okay, so you'll see some textbooks will call the value R, being that R is the actual value in percentage. So you'll see sometimes they'll say that this is actually R, where R is equal to I over 100. Okay, and I obviously being that the percentage that's given in the question. Okay, just so that you know what's happening if you are reading it in the textbook as well. Okay, but as long as you just remember that 0.19% doesn't really make sense whatsoever. So, and actually, sorry, this was a mistake. I was looking at it, doesn't make sense. I is actually R over 100. So R is the percentage given in the question, and I is technically supposed to be this divided by 100. But the percentage implies that it's this divided by 100. So either you divide this, so 19.4 is the R value. Okay, the percentage is the 100. So technically the interest is this divided by 100. But when we put it on our calculators, like when we did previously here, we divide by 100 by putting the percentage in the calculator. Okay, so it's not new, it's not different, it is exactly what we're doing. Okay, it's just another way of looking at it just to, I guess, help you. Okay, so that is the first one, right? Simple interest. So now let's look at the compound interest way. So the compound interest way is A is equal to P1 plus I to the power of N. So I'm going to substitute in all the same values. So the A value was 25,000. The P value was 18,000. 1 plus the interest, which I'm still trying to find. to the power of 2 years. So again, my first step is going to be to divide by the 18,000. Okay, that hasn't changed. So I'm going to have the same answer, which was 25 over 18, which is equal to 1 plus I to the power of 2. Okay, so now in order for us to solve for this, we're going to have to root both sides. So by doing so, we'll have 25, the root of 25 over 18. So we have root answer. So you can leave it like this if you want to. You don't have to solve it right now. Okay, leave your answer as a positive. Don't do plus minus. Okay, and don't confuse yourself with this particular one. Remember, we've already taken the positive value here because we can't go backwards in this equation. Okay, so time doesn't go backwards in this example, so, or in these types of questions. So just choose the positive plus minus. Okay, remember, we know that it is positive based on this answer here, the fact that it's a positive root. Okay, when it's x squared is equal to 9, we don't know what x is. That's why we plus minus 3, because x, this value inside here, could be either positive or negative, but this value here cannot be negative. It would be impossible. Okay, so just to take note of that this value here underneath this root must always be positive. So that's why we always take the positive root. Okay, so then technically the interest is going to be the root of 25 over 18 minus 1. So you can put that in your calculator and you should get an answer. So let's see, the root of 25 over 18 minus 1, which gets you to, again, 0.1785, and it continues. Now again, this doesn't make sense to us, so we multiply it by 100 to get that R value. So we can say, well, R, the actual interest, is 0.1785 multiplied by 100. So the actual interest rate is 17.9%. Okay, and that's how we solve for those questions. Okay, so it's not necessary to write the R. You can just write interest or whatever it is, but just make sure that this times 100 is done in a separate step. Okay, that's why I always do this in color, because it doesn't make sense to just start randomly multiplying by 100. Okay, but you can, in a second step, do this. Okay, you can replace the R and you can just say interest rate. It's also fine. So just make sure that you don't do this and you give this answer in the same step. It doesn't make sense. Okay, so if you need further explanation, I can explain it to you when I get back. But hopefully, like in maths, we don't just do things randomly. So we don't just decide to multiply or we decide to add. Okay, whatever you do on the one side, you have to do on the other side. So the moment that you multiply by 100, you're doing something else, which is why I do it in a second step. Okay, so your homework is going to be from the same exercise, 9.1, on page 285. You're going to do number E, F, G, and then Okay, you're more than welcome to do all of the questions so that you can practice more, but those are the only ones that I really expect you to do. Okay, and then that would conclude this lesson. Okay, so I hope it makes sense. Make sure you go over the examples again if you need to, and essentially then these questions you're just going to apply the same methods that we've already used. Okay, so I hope that it all made sense, and good luck. I'll see you on the next one.